Welcome to Midnight Rain Tales. The world sleeps, and the rain begins to whisper. In this quiet hour, stories drift through the night air, soft, chilling, unforgettable. Here, under the midnight sky, we share the tales the rain refuses to forget. Stay close and listen. Elias snapped upright on the sofa, his heart a frantic drum against his ribs. A tremor ran through his hand where it pressed into the threadbare velvet, the television's spectral glow painting the room in shifting blues. Some droning pitchman hawked miracle wares, but the words dissolved, meaningless static against the sudden, cloying thickness of the air. He levered himself up, swiping a bead of perspiration from his brow. An unformed wrongness coiled in his gut, an invisible weight settling over the small apartment. Try as he might to dismiss the feeling, his gaze kept snagging on the shadowed maw of the hallway, leading towards his sleeping quarters. Then a sound, delicate, furtive, like dry leaves skittering across pavement or paper. Elias's pulse leaped. He rose, limbs leaden, drawn towards the disturbance. At the threshold of his bedroom, he paused, the noise emanating distinctly from within, near the hulking silhouette of the antique dresser beneath the window. His fingers fumbled for the switch, flooding the room with harsh light. The dresser stood impassive, drawers shut, save for the top one, gaping slightly. Another whisper of movement, unmistakably the turning of pages, yet nothing stirred. A clammy film pricked his arms. Ice traced a path down his spine. Compelled by a force that felt alien to his own will, Elias crossed the threshold. His bare feet dragged against the low-pile carpet, a rasping counterpoint to his own ragged breath. Hand hovering over the tarnished brass pull of the top drawer, he hesitated, then tugged. The scent of time-worn fabric and dry wood met him. Beneath the jumble of cotton shirts lay the anomaly, a simple notebook bound in unadorned black, utterly unfamiliar. Had he acquired it somewhere, sometime, then forgotten? A relic of some past impulse, buried and lost. No memory surfaced. It bore no mark, no title, nothing to betray its origin or purpose. He thumbed through its leaves, a cascade of pristine, empty pages. Setting it upon the dresser's scarred surface, he stared, his thoughts a turbulent eddy. Just a notebook, he insisted silently, a flimsy shield against the rising disquiet. He slid the drawer shut, retrieved the object, and extinguished the light, retreating to the relative safety of the living room. The notebook landed on the cheap coffee table with a soft thud. Silence descended thick and watchful. A dull ache began to pulse behind his eyes. He killed the television's drone and stretched out on the sofa, seeking oblivion. Yet his gaze strayed compulsively towards the black rectangle on the table. It remained inert, inscrutable. Exhaustion eventually claimed him, dragging him into a shallow, troubled sleep. Morning found Elias stiff-necked, a metallic bitterness coating his tongue. After dressing mechanically, his attention returned, inevitably, to the notebook, still there, motionless. He attempted a shrug, a dismissal he didn't feel, brewed coffee with unsteady hands, and decided with forced practicality to repurpose the blank volume for sketching out nascent project ideas. Pen in hand at the cramped kitchen table, he began outlining a weekly schedule. The nib moved fluidly over the smooth paper. A few lines committed, he closed the cover. In that moment, nothing seemed overtly sinister, just an ordinary notebook, waiting. Later, however, a visceral tug, sharp and insistent, pulled him back. He opened the notebook again. His breath hitched, his chest constricted. Pages once blank, now teemed with script. A precise, archaic hand utterly unlike his own. Elias's mouth went dry. The words described locales he'd never encountered, places bearing alien-sounding names that resonated with a disquieting familiarity. Labyrinthine passages, monolithic stone altars, clandestine rituals. His mind spun as he flipped onward. This was no mere stream of consciousness rambling. Here were detailed allusions to hidden chambers, tenebrous corridors, and explicit instructions for ceremonies involving bizarre, unsettling artifacts. His hands began to tremble violently when one page disclosed details about him, intimacies never voiced, secrets guarded even from his closest confidants. It mentioned with chilling accuracy a faint scar high on his left shoulder, the ghost of a teenage misadventure, small, rarely noticed, never discussed. Vertigo washed over him. His breathing grew shallow, rapid. A frantic scan of the room confirmed his solitude, yet the feeling of being watched intensified. His heart hammered against his ribs. He couldn't tear his eyes from the script, the sharp, angular letters suggesting a fountain pen's steady passage, the ink a faded sepulchral black. A tingling numbness spread through his fingers. Snapping the notebook shut, he surged from the chair, pacing the confines of the kitchen like a caged animal. The clock on the wall ticked with agonizing slowness, each second stretching into an eternity. Keys jangling in his fist, Elias fled the apartment, desperate for air, for perspective. He drove without direction, the suburban streets blurring past his unfocused eyes. His head felt dense, heavy, his gaze darting nervously, half expecting monstrous shapes to coalesce from the mundane scenery. Pulling into the lot of a generic coffee shop, he sought refuge in anonymity, ordering a black coffee he barely tasted. He huddled by the window, watching pedestrians drift along the sun-drenched sidewalk. Ordinary life unfolded mere feet away, yet the memory of those inked pages remained branded onto his thoughts. The unnerving references to altars, to robed figures chanting in shadowed recesses. Was this a breakdown? Had he, in some fugue state, authored this madness himself? The notion churned his stomach. An hour dissolved before he could muster the will to return. Climbing the stairs to his apartment felt like ascending a scaffold. He unlocked the door, stepping into the strained quiet of the living room. The notebook rested on the kitchen table, exactly as he'd left it, yet an inexplicable chill permeated the air. A subtle drop in temperature that had nothing to do with the weather. He approached it warily, hand outstretched, then retracting. Hesitation warred with a morbid curiosity. Picking it up, he registered the impossible. More pages filled, the same stark, meticulous hand. These new entries spoke of entities described as towering shadows, gaunt-limbed beings said to dwell in subterranean warrens beneath time-worn structures. Sweat trickled down his neck. His pulse roared in his ears. He set the notebook down abruptly, backing away as if from a venomous thing. His eyes stung. He'd been staring too long, letting it draw him in. A sliver of rationality pierced the panic. Discarding it felt wrong, dangerous even. Understanding, however perilous, seemed the only path. Retrieving the book, he carried it to the living room sofa, sinking into the familiar give of the cushions. His leg jittered uncontrollably. Phone in hand, he typed frantic queries into search engines. Notebook writes itself. Automatic writing phenomena, haunted objects. The results were useless. Pulpy fiction, rambling conspiracy forums, nothing concrete. Heat flared in his face. Rising, he stalked to the window, gazing down at the street below. Cars slid past. A man ambled by with his dog. Normality persisted out there, rendering the oppressive atmosphere within his own walls even more isolating, more like a trap. The remainder of the evening bled away in restless pacing, punctuated by furtive glances at the black notebook on the coffee table. Should he read further? Dare he? His thoughts kept circling back to the uncanny knowledge it possessed. The scar. What other hidden facets of his life lay exposed within its pages? Midnight approached, exhaustion finally outweighing the gnawing anxiety. He carried the notebook back to the bedroom, secreted it within the dresser drawer once more, and crawled beneath his covers. His mind remained a maelstrom, but his body craved cessation. Eventually, sleep took him. Hours later, a distinct sound tore him from the depths. The soft, rhythmic turning of pages. His blood ran cold, unmistakable, precise. Someone or something was leafing through the notebook. He sat bolt upright in the darkness, limbs shaking, heart slamming against his sternum like a trapped bird. Fumbling, he found the bedside lamp switch. Warm light spilled across the room, illuminating the dresser. The top drawer stood slightly ajar, just as before. He stared, breath held captive in his chest, trying to quell the tremors. His mouth was parchment dry, his arms strangely weak. Forcing himself out of bed, he moved towards it, the floorboards groaning under his weight. He pulled the drawer fully open. There lay the notebook, its pages visibly, impossibly ruffling in the still air. No draft, no breeze, just the autonomous flutter. Elias felt his knees threaten to buckle. He snatched the notebook. The rustling ceased instantly. Silence crashed down, amplifying the ringing in his ears. Clutching the object, he bolted from the bedroom, dropping it onto the coffee table as if it burned his skin. He paced the living room, rubbing the back of his neck, his skin prickling with a feverish anxiety. Opening it again felt unthinkable, a threshold he wasn't ready to cross. Collapsing onto the sofa, head in his hands, he focused on slowing his frantic breathing, ordering the chaos in his mind. After long minutes, he rose, deliberately locked the bedroom door, retrieved a spare blanket, and resigned himself to the couch. Sleep, when it came, was fragmented and haunted. Dawn arrived gray and unwelcome. Elias's eyes felt like sandpaper. His neck ached. He regarded the notebook on the table with a mixture of dread and grim resolve. He had to know if more had appeared. Gingerly, he opened it. Indeed, new script filled the pages. It spoke of a place called the Crimson Mill, a derelict structure on the town's periphery. He'd heard the name whispered, associated with decay and long abandonment. The notebook issued clear instructions. Drive there under the cloak of night. Seek a hidden cellar. His scalp tightened as he absorbed the words. The text painted a picture of a ritual chamber marked with arcane sigils, promising something of significance awaited him there. A potent, undeniable urge to obey surged within him. Nausea twisted his insides. His legs felt charged with restless energy. He fought it, pacing, snapping his fingers, the apartment walls seeming to close in. There was nowhere else to turn. His thoughts became a loop, replaying the directions, fixating on the mill. A glance at the clock solidified a desperate compromise. He would simply drive by, observe from a distance. Nothing more. Grabbing his jacket, phone, and keys, he left the apartment, pointedly leaving the notebook behind. The miles dissolved slowly, the familiar landscape giving way to the sparser terrain beyond the town limits. Soon, the Crimson Mill's skeletal frame loomed at the terminus of a weed-choked gravel lane. 2 stories of faded, peeling paint and blind, boarded-up windows stood sentinel against the encroaching wilderness. Tall grasses whispered around its base. Elias parked on the shoulder, his throat constricting. Desolation radiated from the structure. He got out, the cool air, a brief balm on his face. Gravel crunched beneath his worn sneakers. No other cars, no signs of life. He drew closer, noting the decay in the window boards, the main door sagging on rusted hinges, slightly ajar. Peering inside, he saw dust motes dancing in weak shafts of sunlight. The air hung heavy, stale. Rotting timbers and warped floorboards littered the cavernous ground floor. He listened intently. Only the faint moan of wind through unseen cracks broke the silence. He moved cautiously into the main space, navigating debris, his skin crawling with an unseen awareness. The mill felt poised, expectant, every nerve strained, listening. In a far corner, obscured by shadows, he found it, a set of stairs descending into darkness, terminating at a heavy wooden door secured by a substantial, rust-encrusted padlock. His heart gave a painful thud. The hidden basement, just as the notebook foretold. Tremors returned to his hands as he descended the rickety steps. He rattled the padlock. It felt ancient, immovable. Scanning the surrounding detritus, his eyes fell upon a length of rusted metal, a crowbar. Palms slick with sweat, he jammed the tip into the lock mechanism. Grunting with effort, straining against the ossified metal, he finally forced it. The shackle sprang open with a sharp, echoing crack that made his ears ring. Pulling the heavy door outward released a potent wave of mildew and damp earth. He coughed, shielding his nose and mouth. Raising his phone, he activated the flashlight. Its beam sliced through the gloom, revealing a narrow passage with weeping walls and an uneven concrete floor. He took tentative steps forward, chest tight, mouth desert dry. The light illuminated an archway further down, opening into a larger chamber. Hesitantly, he approached the threshold, stomach churning. He found himself in a circular room. The walls, floor to ceiling, were covered in bizarre, deeply incised markings, intricate lines forming eldritch geometries, a dizzying pattern that seemed to writhe at the edge of his vision. In the exact center stood a low, smooth stone platform, its surface strangely polished. He swept the flashlight beam around, probing the corners, the oppressive weight in his ears intensifying. Nothing else occupied the space but the sigils and the altar. A primal urge to flee warred with an equally strong, inexplicable compulsion to remain. His heart hammered violently, a painful rhythm in the suffocating quiet. Then he heard it again, the distinct, papery whisper of pages turning. The sound echoed unnervingly in the subterranean dampness. He spun, flashlight beams stabbing wildly into the shadows. Empty, the rustling persisted for several heartbeats, then ceased abruptly. A full-body tremor seized him. The notebook was miles away on his coffee table, yet the sound had been undeniable. His breathing grew ragged, sweat stinging his eyes. Backing towards the archway, intent only on escape, he froze. Footsteps directly above him. Slow, deliberate treads crossing the floorboards of the mill's main level. His heart leaped into his throat. He couldn't gauge how many, only the measured, heavy pace. He aimed the flashlight beam back up the passage towards the door, expecting a figure to emerge from the gloom. The footsteps faded. The ensuing silence was somehow more terrifying. He scrambled backward, keeping the light trained on the passage, then turned and ran, bursting through the doorway, clattering up the stairs, back into the dusty expanse of the ground floor. Vacant, pulse thundering, he sprinted outside, across the gravel, fumbling with his car door, throwing himself inside. He slammed the locks down, sitting for a moment, gasping, hands shaking too violently to reliably grip the steering wheel. Finally, the engine caught. He reversed sharply, tires spitting gravel, speeding away from the Crimson Mill, away from the unsettling silence and the things it contained. A gnawing sense of incompletion plagued him. The notebook promised he'd find something important, but the ritual room held nothing tangible. Had he missed it? Or was this merely another step on a path he didn't understand? Nausea roiled as he drove towards the city, the setting sun painting the sky in bruised oranges and purples. His phone chimed, a friend suggesting a casual meetup. He ignored it, his mind a chaotic storm. Back at his apartment building, he paused before his own door, a wave of reluctance washing over him. Unlocking it, he stepped inside. The coffee table was bare. The notebook was gone. A cold fist clenched around his heart. He searched frantically, living room, kitchen, scanning every surface, every shadow. Vanished. His scalp prickled. Drawn by an invisible thread, he moved towards the bedroom. He pushed the door open, flipped the light switch. The top dresser drawer was open, and inside, nestled amongst the fabric, sat the black notebook, angled slightly as if awaiting his return. He stared, rooted to the spot, a profound unwillingness to approach it seizing him. His breath came in shallow gasps. His forehead felt damp and cold. Swallowing hard against the lump in his throat, he forced himself forward, reached out, and picked it up. The cover felt unnaturally cool beneath his fingertips. It fell open, seemingly of its own accord, to a freshly inked page. The script informed him he had made progress, that he was deemed ready for the subsequent stage. It alluded to further destinations, more complex rituals, escalating instructions. His vision swam, his throat tightened. Gently, he closed the book and set it back down. What now? He stood motionless in the charged silence of the room, pulse erratic, the low hum in his ears the only sound. Now sleep offers little respite. Each night, as Elias lies rigid on the sofa, the bedroom door firmly shut, he hears it, the soft, insistent whisper of pages turning from beyond the barrier. He wakes each morning to find new entries, the script growing denser, the instructions more arcane. They speak of impossible geometries, of shadowed paths beneath the city, of forgotten artifacts and the precise, unnerving steps required to unearth some veiled objective. They speak too of him, dissecting his deepest fears, laying bare his most guarded secrets. He clings to the fraying edges of rationality, telling himself this is delusion, hallucination, a stress-induced breakdown. Yet The ink is real, the pages fill, and the compulsion to follow, to obey, grows stronger with each sunrise, a terrifying counterpoint to the tremor of fear that constantly courses through him. He doesn't know the destination. He only knows he is caught in its inexorable current, unable to step away. Resistance only seems to deepen the pull. The nightly rustle, the morning's revelations. Each day presents another fragment of a terrifying mosaic. Each day he steps further into a landscape of shadows he never sought, increasingly uncertain of how much of his own will remains. It began, for me, on an October Tuesday, deep into the night. The memory clings because 14 hours wrestling crates in the echoing vastness of the distribution center had left my spine screaming. Past the kitchen window I trudged, fatigue a heavy cloak, and the backyard security lamp flared abruptly awake. That's when I registered it, an upright silhouette, utterly still, poised at the demarcation where groomed lawns surrendered to tangled woods. My coffee mug, halfway to my lips, hovered. The world paused, tall, perhaps 6 feet, motionless between the skeletal arms of 2 ancient oaks. Features were non-existent. It was less a person, more a human-shaped void cut from the tapestry of the night. Lowering the mug with exaggerated care, I drifted towards the window pane. A subtle shift from the form. It receded, blending partially with the deeper gloom between the trees. A frantic drummer took up residence behind my ribs. I pressed my forehead to the cool glass, eyes straining. The security light threw elongated, distorted shadows across the damp grass, yet the presence remained undeniable, half submerged in darkness. My phone felt alien in my trembling hand. The heavy-duty metal flashlight, a potential bludgeon, a cold comfort. The back door lock yielded with a click that seemed deafening. Autumn's breath, sharp with the scent of leaf mold and sodden earth, rushed to meet me. My work boots thudded heavily on the wooden deck planks. "Hey!" The sound ripped from my throat, thin and insignificant in the vast quiet. "Get off my property!" Another step backward from the figure. It was now barely discernible, a concentration of shadow within shadow. I thumbed the flashlight, unleashing a harsh beam that swept the tree line. Nothing but bark, fallen foliage, the empty spaces between trunks. My exhalations plumed white against the chill. Down the steps I went, the light's circle bouncing erratically. The security lamp overhead hummed, a sterile island of illumination. Beyond it, the darkness felt absolute, intensified. Halfway across the lawn, I halted. A primal tremor ran through me, an insistence, go back inside. Then movement again, a faint lateral slide, keeping religiously to the umbra. My throat constricted. One more tentative step forward from me, and it flowed deeper into the woods. The motion was unnervingly smooth, liquid, devoid of the expected sounds of passage. No snapping twigs, no rustle of disturbed leaves, just silent, fluid evasion. I retreated slowly, the backs of my legs bumping the deck stairs. Turning, I scrambled inside. The deadbolt slid home. I checked it twice. Blind slats rattled down, sealing the night out. The remainder of that Tuesday dissolved into Wednesday morning from the depths of my recliner, facing the darkened windows, flashlight resting heavy in my lap. Sleep was a foreign country. Dawn revealed a dew-kissed tree line, pristine. No footprints marred the damp earth. No fractured branches, no scuffed leaves. Nothing tangible to anchor the previous night's vision. Doubt crept in, insidious. Perhaps exhaustion's hallucination, fueled by caffeine and sleeplessness. Until Wednesday evening arrived. The same ritual, the late shift's aftermath, the protesting spine, the ritual coffee. I deliberately averted my gaze from the kitchen window, while the microwave hummed, transforming a frozen brick into dinner. Futile curiosity, a morbid magnet, pulled my eyes toward the glass. It stood there, identical spot, identical stillness. My meal slipped from numb fingers, its plastic shell cracking sharply on the linoleum. The clatter elicited no reaction. It simply remained, a stark cutout against the looming trees. This time, I stayed indoors, a prisoner watching the sentinel, feeling its unseen gaze return mine across the shadowed lawn for hours. Thursday, Friday, Saturday, an unwavering nightly vigil, always at the yard's edge, always dissolving backward if I dared approach. My phone camera captured only blurs, artifacts of light and shadow. A newly installed security camera yielded footage of nothing but indistinct, shifting darkness where the figure should have been. My neighbor, Marcus, listened with strained patience. "Probably just a deer, Elias," he offered, unconvinced. "Get caught in the light, they freeze up." But I knew deer. Their movements were terrestrial, startled. They made noise. This entity, this thing, moved like drifting smoke and was utterly silent. Sunday prompted a call to the authorities. Officer Bellwether arrived, walked the property perimeter, her pen scratching dutifully in a small notebook. Professionalism was her shield, but behind it, I recognized the look, the same one Marcus wore, the quiet assessment of a mind unraveling. She suggested trimming the oaks, letting in more light, floated the possibility of local youths engaging in elaborate pranks. But teenagers lacked this unnerving persistence. Teenagers would eventually reveal themselves through boredom, laughter, or muddy footprints. This presence felt ancient, purposeful, its objective terrifyingly obscure. Sleep deprivation gnawed at my focus. At work the following Tuesday, a dropped crate nearly shattered my foot. My supervisor, citing safety concerns, sent me home. I sat in my car in the driveway for a long 20 minutes, the familiar tree line a menacing backdrop, before summoning the courage to enter my own house. That night, resolve hardened. I would outlast it. A chair materialized on the deck, swaddled in my thickest coat, flanked by 2 thermoses of coffee. Flashlight in my lap, phone charged. Sunrise would find me here, if necessary. The security lamp snapped awake at 8:43 p.m. I noted the time on my phone, a pointless anchor in the strangeness, and there it was, punctual as a tide between the Sentinel Oaks. 2 weeks and its chosen station never varied. "What do you want?" My voice, surprisingly, held steady, fear calcified into a brittle anger. "Why are you here?" Silence answered. Stillness answered. Only that patient, unwavering regard. At 11:17 p.m., a sound finally broke the quiet. A faint, dry scraping like fingernails dragged across rough stone. The silhouette shifted infinitesimally. The sound originated from it. My knuckles whitened around the flashlight's grip. The scraping intensified, grating. Then, impossibly, it stepped forward, out from the tree line's embrace, the first advance towards me, ever. My heart hammered against my sternum, every muscle coiled, primed for flight. Another step. It now stood fully exposed, yet the security light seemed to bend around it, failing to illuminate, only defining its absolute blackness. A mobile void, a tear in the fabric of the perceived world. The scraping swelled, vibrating in my teeth, filling my auditory canals. Another step and another. Halfway across the lawn, I raised the flashlight, thumb poised on the switch, yet paralyzed. Some deep animal instinct screamed that clarity was the last thing I wanted. I surged to my feet, the chair tumbling backward with a clatter. My legs were trembling violently. The figure halted. The scraping ceased abruptly, leaving a ringing vacuum. 20 feet separated us in a tense tableau. Then an arm lifted. The motion was fundamentally wrong, too fluid, angles shifting impossibly like time-lapsed botany played in reverse. The limb extended, elongating beyond any human proportion, reaching across the intervening space. I bolted, slammed the door, fumbled the lock, pounded up the stairs to the bedroom, collapsing against the wall, breath tearing through my lungs. I did not risk another glance out the window that night. Morning found me calling in sick. The day became a frenzy of defensive measures, installing blinding floodlights, hacking back brush, lopping low-hanging branches, a desperate campaign against shadows. More cameras, motion sensors, even a costly electric fence system. All futile. Night fell and it returned. Its usual spot, now starkly lit, surrounded by cleared ground. The cameras recorded only baffling static. The sensors remained stubbornly inert. The electric fence hummed impotently, but a shift had occurred. Now it would periodically step forward, pause halfway across the lawn, raise that geometrically impossible arm, only retreating when I fled indoors or averted my gaze. My life inverted. Sleep became a daytime refuge. Nights were for vigilance. Blackout curtains shrouded my windows. Caffeine pills became sustenance. Spreadsheets tracked its appearances, movements, the evolving sounds. A desperate search for pattern, for reason, for anything to dispel the encroaching madness. Week 3 claimed my job. Too many absences, too many near accidents fueled by exhaustion. Marcus's concerned visits dwindled, then ceased. Officer Bellwether's voicemail became an impassable barrier. I couldn't fault them. I heard the frantic edge in my own voice. The figure, meanwhile, grew bolder. Each night brought it slightly closer before its retreat. The scraping sound deepened, acquired texture, layers. Sometimes buried within the grating noise, I hallucinated whispers, syllables belonging to no known tongue. Outside became forbidden territory. Groceries arrived via delivery. Blinds remained drawn, but the house offered no sanctuary. The air grew heavy, stagnant, the walls subtly contracting. Its presence permeated everything, a constant, silent pressure. 4 weeks dissolved my sanity. Sleep-starved, isolated, marinated in terror, I reached a breaking point. At 3 a.m., seated on the cold kitchen floor, the incessant scraping a torturous soundtrack, a decision formed. An ending was required. Flashlight gripped, coat donned, I stepped onto the deck. It stood waiting, arm already beginning its grotesque unfurling. A deep breath, tasting the damp night air, and I began walking towards it. No retreat this time. The scraping escalated with each footfall, a physical force against my eardrums. My vision tunneled, edges blurring, but my legs kept moving. 10 feet. Details resolved, though my mind recoiled from processing them. The darkness wasn't mere shadow, it was intrinsic, flowing, an upward cascade of liquid night. 5 feet. The arms stretched, impossibly jointed, reaching. The scraping consumed all sound. Warmth trickled from my nose. Blood. 3 feet. 2, 1. I stopped. Raised the flashlight, thumb finding the switch. The figure lowered its arm. The sound cut off. Absolute silence crashing down. And in that silence, I heard breathing, but not from the figure, from behind me. Slowly, I turned. Another stood on my deck, identical to the first. Its arm lifted. Another stepped from behind the gnarled oak to my left. Another materialized beside the garden shed. More emerged from the tree line. 2, 5, a dozen. Each the same impossible silhouette, each extending an unnatural limb towards the center, towards me. I stood frozen, encircled by darkness given form. The flashlight slipped from nerveless fingers, thudding softly on the grass. A synchronized step inward from the circle. Another. The scraping resumed. Multiphonic now, a chorus of desiccation and stone and something else, something ravenous. I closed my eyes, felt the displacement of air as those 2 long arms converged and waited. Elias, hey, Elias, Marcus's voice, sharp, cutting through the sound. A car door slammed nearby, footsteps crunching on the gravel drive. My eyes flew open. The yard was empty, stark under the glare of the security lights. Marcus stood at the side gate, a paper bag in his hand. "Brought you some grub," he called, his tone attempting normalcy. "Haven't been picking up. We're worried, man." I scanned the perimeter. No figures, no scraping. Only the chirp of crickets, the distant hum of traffic. "Come inside," I managed, my voice raspy, unfamiliar. "It's not safe out here after dark." He shot me a bewildered look, but followed me in. I bolted the door, checked it twice. "You look like death warmed over," he observed, unpacking cartons of takeout. "When did you last sleep?" I didn't answer, moving instead to the kitchen window, pulling the blinds tight. Looking was unnecessary. I knew they were out there, patient in the shadows, waiting for solitude to reclaim me. Marcus stayed for 2 hours. We ate. We spoke of trivialities, his job, the local team, his kids. He masterfully ignored my reflexive flinches at every creak and sigh the house made. When he finally left, I escorted him to his car, remained standing in the driveway until his taillights vanished. Then, back inside, locks secured, I began to pack. The next morning, I called my sister in Arizona. A spare room awaited, she confirmed. Sunshine, she promised. Endless sunshine and landscapes devoid of deep woods, scarce on shadows where things might conceal themselves. Movers were hired. Most of my life stayed behind. I drove west, the contents of my car a meager testament to my former existence, refusing to look back until Ohio was a memory 3 states past. Months have passed. My current residence is a stuccoed apartment block, surrounded by concrete. East-facing windows welcome the fierce desert sunrise. I work daytime hours in another warehouse, sleep often with the lights blazing. Occasionally, I scan the online news from my old town, searching for reports, missing persons, inexplicable sightings near the house I abandoned. Nothing yet. New owners settled in last month. The urge to call, to warn them arises, but the futility, the sheer madness of it, silences me. Perhaps it truly was just my mind fracturing under pressure, as the therapist I now see suggests. Stress, exhaustion, isolation, potent hallucinogens. She is likely correct. Still, I avoid the outdoors after sunset, and sometimes late at night, drifting in the liminal space before sleep. I hear it, or imagine I do, a faint, dry scraping, like autumn leaves skittering across pavement, seeming to emanate from just beyond my window. The blinds remain firmly closed. I have no desire to confirm if anything waits out there, reaching for me with arms too long for this world. I refuse to know if they followed. I refuse to know if they are still waiting. The first intimation of wrongness arrived with the dawn, as I roused myself in the pre-light hush to inspect some persistent building frailties. It was perhaps 5, the sun just beginning to spill molten gold over the jagged teeth of neighboring roofs. Below, the courtyard lay bathed in a nascent luminescence, sharp enough to etch long skeletal shadows from the sentinel trees and stark metal benches onto the flagstones. I stood sentinel myself by a fractured pane in the third-floor corridor, breath misting the cool glass, and discerned a lone figure near the far retaining wall, engaged in the rhythmic ritual of sweeping. A janitor, I assumed, occupied with early duties. Yet, as my gaze sharpened, locking onto this solitary form, the air thickened in my lungs. He cast no shadow. The light, angling low and clear, struck him full on the side, yet the ground beneath him remained stubbornly unmarked by his silhouette. The broom, yes, its slender darkness stretched away, a tangible thing, but the man himself? An absence, a void where darkness should have pooled. A cold fist clenched in my gut. Disorientation surged through my chest. Squinting, I pressed closer to the window, the glass cold against my forehead, wondering if sleeplessness had finally conjured phantoms from the thin morning air. I am Elias Thorne, the custodian of this aging edifice, a man who prides himself on vigilance. Leaks, frayed wiring, the groans of settling plaster, these are my domain. This old structure demands constant attention, often pulling me from my bed at ungodly hours to pace the echoing hallways, listening for the whispers of decay. But this morning's anomaly wasn't a weeping pipe or a faltering circuit. It was a man absorbed in his work, yet utterly divorced from the light that defined everything else around him. Decision coalesced. I had to descend to see this aberration up close. My limbs felt leaden, my pulse a frantic drum against my ribs. The stairwell exhaled its usual dank perfume, old concrete, a hint of subterranean mold. This building wears its years heavily, its corridors punctuated by temperamental flickering bulbs I perpetually intend to replace. My own footfalls seemed unnervingly loud, swallowed and spat back by the enclosed space, amplifying my unease. I reached the heavy steel door accessing the courtyard, its hinges groaning a metallic complaint as I pushed it open. The sweeper glanced up, a fleeting, incurious movement before resuming his methodical strokes. The dry rustle of bristles on stone was the only sound. I advanced, eyes fixed on him. The sun, climbing higher, now rendered the shadows of potted ferns and benches with crisp clarity. Still, his form cast no corresponding darkness. The sheer wrongness of it constricted my throat, prickled the skin along my neck. The hairs on my forearms lifted. I fought for composure, clinging to the logic that governed my days. Tenant disputes, budget spreadsheets, repair schedules. Panic was an unfamiliar, unwelcome guest. Yet, confronted with this visual paradox, my own senses felt suspect. I cleared my throat, the sound thin in the open air. "Ho there," I managed, the name I vaguely associated with a previous, infrequent handyman. Finch, perhaps, escaping my lips before I could reconsider. Had he been here before? Brief glimpses, minor tasks. I'd never truly registered his face, assuming him dispatched by the agency we'd long since ceased employing. "Mr. Finch, can you hear me?" Another step forward, the crunch of loose gravel underfoot. The courtyard pavement, webbed with fissures, felt uneven beneath my soles. He pivoted, the motion unnervingly fluid, almost languid, and I saw his eyes. A glacial chill snaked down my spine. They were opaque, milky like clouded glass, devoid of discernible iris or pupil. His gaze drifted across me, vacant, registering nothing. My chest tightened, breath caught somewhere between my ribs. Words failed me, my throat was desert dry. He turned back, resuming the steady shh of the broom. A faint zephyr stirred, carrying not warmth but a sharp, penetrating cold that made me flinch. The leaves on the courtyard trees whispered, rustling despite the otherwise profound stillness of the morning. I retreated a step. My heart hammered against my sternum. My palms grew slick with sweat. "Hello?" I tried again, striving for a steadiness I didn't feel. Are you new?" A difficult swallow. "Working here now?" Silence answered, only the relentless scrape of the broom. My gaze dropped to his attire, a uniform of dark, indeterminate gray, cut in an archaic style, something dredged from decades past. The fabric appeared threadbare, lacking any modern insignia or name badge. His feet seemed solid enough, planted firmly on the concrete, yet still. No shadow trailed behind. What was one supposed to do? A primal urge warred within me, shake him, demand answers, yet a deeper, more potent dread coiled in my stomach, an instinct screaming danger, do not touch. The breeze gusted momentarily, sharper this time, raising goose flesh that pebbled my arms. Retreating seemed the only option. I needed records, tangible proof. My mind raced, a frantic scramble of questions lacking anchor points. Facts. I needed facts. I hurried back inside, the heavy door clanging shut with unnerving finality. I took the stairs two at a time, breath coming in ragged bursts, keys jangling a nervous rhythm in my pocket. Back in my apartment, I went straight to the battered oak filing cabinet, its drawers protesting with a high-pitched squeal. Here resided the building's documented life. Contracts, invoices, every worker who'd crossed the threshold. Folder after folder I extracted, hands trembling slightly as I scanned the contents. Sweat beaded on my forehead. The building's plumbing gurgled faintly within the walls, a familiar sound now fraught with sinister undertones. Time blurred as I sifted through years of paperwork. The agreement with the old cleaning company surfaced. No mention of a Finch. No record of any dedicated caretaker assigned in the last 10 years. This place hadn't employed regular on-site staff for a very long time. Nausea churned. It made no sense. I knew I'd seen this man before, attending to small jobs, hadn't I? Yet the paper trail was blank, a ghost in the machine, or worse. I slammed the drawer shut, forcing deep, measured breaths. My head throbbed. A glance at the clock. Nearly 6:30. Full daylight now. Perhaps I should return, see if he remained. Had fatigue painted hallucinations onto the canvas of the dawn? But the memory, those void-like eyes, the impossible absence of shadow, felt too visceral, too real to be mere fancy. Downstairs again. The corridor air felt unnaturally chill, despite the summer season. A stiffness had settled in my joints. Pushing open the courtyard door, I squinted against the bright morning glare. The space was empty, utterly deserted. No sweeper, no broom left leaning against the wall, no lingering disturbance save for the frantic disquietude thrumming within my own chest. Inquiries were necessary. Surely someone else had noticed. I rapped on the doors of a few early-rising tenants down the first-floor hall. Bleary-eyed figures appeared clad in dressing gowns, regarding me with mild confusion. A janitor sweeping at dawn. Heads shook. One neighbor quipped about my overworking. Another advised more sleep. No corroboration. No shared sighting. I was alone with this impossible observation. The remainder of the day passed in a haze of renewed, fruitless searching through records. The old cleaning company's number? Disconnected. Every potential lead dissolved into nothing. It felt like chasing smoke. By evening, exhaustion weighed me down like lead ballast. Television offered no distraction. The image of the shadowless sweeper, those vacant eyes, superimposed itself onto every flickering scene. Sleep, when it finally came, was shallow and fractured, haunted by the rhythmic scrape of an invisible broom. The next morning, I woke before the sun, around 4:30. My body ached with fatigue, eyes burning. Coffee was a tasteless, necessary ritual. Then, drawn by a morbid compulsion, I returned to the hallway window. The sky bled from deep indigo to the faintest blush of orange at the horizon. Minutes crawled. Then, as the light strengthened precisely as before, he materialized in the courtyard, stiff-backed, moving with that same deliberate, almost somnambulant grace, pushing the broom across the concrete. My heart leaped, a frantic bird against my ribs. A familiar, prickling sensation crawled along my arms. Fists clenched, I fought for calm. Opening the window a fraction, I strained to listen. Only the harsh whisper of bristles on stone broke the pre-dawn quiet. Swallowing hard against a constricted throat, I resolved to face him again. The descent felt heavier this time, each step an effort. Past the flickering corridor light, through the same miasma of damp decay. Entering the courtyard, I found him in the far corner, methodically clearing fallen leaves near the base of the gnarled ancient trees. The rising sun struck oblique rays across the space, painting sharp, definite shadows from every object. Except him. My skin felt clammy, cold despite the warming air. "Finch!" I called louder this time, the name tasting like ash on my tongue. He ceased his motion, head swiveling towards me. Those same dull, lifeless eyes. A gust of frigid air swirled around me, inexplicably cold. The branches overhead shivered and sighed. I shuddered involuntarily, taking hesitant steps closer, battling the rising nausea. He offered no word, no sign of recognition. Close enough now I could discern the pallor of his skin, etched with fine lines that might have been age, or perhaps something else entirely, like cracks in old porcelain. "Are you employed by the cleaning service?" I pressed, my voice betraying a tremor I despised. "We don't have an assigned janitor currently. Who sent you?" No reply. He turned back, resuming the endless sweep. The repetitive sound grated, fraying my nerves. Anger flickered, quickly doused by a deeper, colder tide of fear. Part of me screamed to flee. Another part felt inextricably bound to this enigma. Tentatively, I reached out, my hand trembling, intending merely to touch his sleeve, to provoke some reaction, any reaction. Just as my fingertips brushed the coarse gray fabric, another blast of cold air slammed through the courtyard, fiercer than before. The trees thrashed. Dead leaves spun in frantic eddies around my ankles. I froze, heart pounding erratically, mouth parched. A palpable wrongness saturated the air, a silent, urgent warning. Do not touch. My instincts screamed it. I snatched my hand back as if burned, a strange tingling vibrating in my fingertips. He swept on, oblivious, immutable. Stumbling backward, I swallowed against the lump lodged in my throat. What now? My thoughts spun uselessly. Retreating into the hallway, I let the heavy door boom shut, leaning against the cool metal, gasping for breath. The relative warmth inside felt alien after the courtyard's localized chill. My shirt clung damply to my back. A plan. I needed a rational course of action, though rationality felt increasingly remote. The basement archives. Older records stored in a locked room beneath the building's foundations. I held the key. Descending into the subterranean gloom, I fumbled for the light switch. A single naked bulb flickered reluctantly to life, illuminating rows of dust-laden metal shelves groaning under the weight of forgotten boxes. The air hung thick with the scent of decay and mildew. I began pulling down cartons labeled with faded dates, searching for logs, personnel files, anything pertaining to a caretaker from a bygone era. Hours melted away under the flickering bulb, deciphering brittle, typewritten pages, plumbing repairs, electrical faults, vague references to past staff, none matching the figure above. A gardener mentioned briefly in logs from a decade prior, but the description was wrong. Frustration mounted. Finally defeated, I slumped onto a cold metal stool, rubbing aching temples. The oppressive silence punctuated only by the bulb's faint sizzle, pressed in. One last check. Locking the basement door behind me, I ascended. Back in the courtyard, the sun reigned supreme. Ordinary morning sounds drifted in. Birdsong, the distant drone of traffic. Normalcy had reasserted itself, except the broom. It leaned against the far wall, precisely where I'd last seen him. Hesitantly, I approached, touched the worn wooden handle. It felt unnaturally cold, though perhaps it was just the ambient temperature. I lifted it. No maker's mark, no brand. An artifact seemingly older than any standard issue tool. The bristles were stiff, worn down. A shiver traced its way down my spine just holding it. I replaced it carefully, backing away. The days that followed fell into a disturbing rhythm. Each dawn he would appear. Each dawn he would sweep, casting no shadow. Each dawn he would ignore my attempts at contact, heralded only by that unnatural cold. Sleep offered little respite. I questioned older residents again, probing memories for a long-forgotten caretaker, fitting his description. Puzzled glances, vague recollections of someone perhaps long ago, but nothing concrete. Most dismissed my inquiries, attributing them to stress, to the burdens of managing this crumbling pile. Each encounter left me shaken, heart pounding, hands slick with sweat, enveloped in that creeping, localized chill. The approach of morning became a source of profound dread. I felt ensnared within these old walls, haunted by flickering lights and inexplicable drafts. Triple-checking locks I knew offered no defense against whatever this was. On the 8th morning of this unnerving pattern, I woke again before my alarm, nerves stretched taut. Exhaustion was a physical weight, yet my mind refused rest. To the window, inevitably, and there he was, sweeping the same patch of ground beneath the dim, pre-dawn sky. The familiar knot tightened in my stomach, my body bracing itself. Sweat filmed my brow. My throat felt scraped raw. Duty, or perhaps obsession, propelled me downward once more, toward the inevitable chill, the vacant stare. The stairwell seemed longer, the air heavier. The courtyard door groaned its familiar lament. He stood near the center this time. "Finch," I called, my voice thin, wavering. He turned. That same empty gaze washed over me, then back to his task. The cold breeze arrived on cue, tangible, biting. My teeth began to chatter faintly, a betraying tremor despite the mild air. Nausea surged, my legs felt unsteady. "I know you're not on any records," I forced out, the words trembling. "Who are you? Why are you here?" Only the steady scrape of the broom answered. I stood rooted, staring, muscles rigid, breath coming in short, sharp gasps. My chest ached. The broom moved back and forth, an inexorable pendulum marking some unseen time. A tremor started in my hands. The edges of my vision darkened momentarily. The flagstones seemed to waver. The wind gusted again, swirling dust and leaves. I pressed back against the rough brick wall, fighting faintness. After a long moment, my breathing steadied, ragged but controlled. I turned, walked numbly back inside. The tension remained, a hard knot between my shoulder blades, but the oppressive cold receded behind the closed door. Through the thick steel, I could still faintly hear it. The scraping, relentless and unending, echoing now not just in the courtyard, but in the chambers of my mind. Back in the dubious sanctuary of my apartment, I leaned against the door, heart hammering, clothes damp. Logical explanations flicker and die. Hallucinations, stress, some bizarre optical illusion. But the sensory details remain undeniable. The sound of his non-existent footfalls, the tangible shadow of the broom, the profound absence of his own, and those eyes reflecting nothing, seeing nothing, yet turned towards me. And so it rests. Each morning before the sun fully crests the rooftops, the cycle renews. No records illuminate his presence. No neighbor confirms his existence. I am trapped in this routine of dread and morbid curiosity, waking before dawn, gut churning to witness his silent, shadowless labor. Each attempt at confrontation is met with the same vacant stare, the same impenetrable silence, the same wave of inexplicable cold that pushes me back. He doesn't speak. He doesn't stop. This old building holds its secrets close and offers no sign that this vigil will ever end. I am left adrift in a sea of questions, anchored only by the certainty of his return at dawn, sweeping, casting no shadow, turning those colorless eyes my way before resuming his endless task, leaving behind a chill that settles deep in my bones and refuses to dissipate with the rising sun. The plastic rectangle met the slot, a brittle snap in the corridor's thick silence, yet the mechanism remained stubbornly inert. Alara frowned, the gesture pulling at the exhaustion etched onto her face. She slid the keycard again. Nothing yielded. A glance upward confirmed the numerals bolted to the door. 314, indisputably her room. Why then this refusal? This establishment hadn't been her first choice, nor her second. Pulling into the desolate lot earlier, its neon sign had sputtered like a dying nerve, casting lurid pulses over walls shedding paint like sunburnt skin. But the hour was obscenely late, fatigue a leaden weight in her limbs, and the next town a rumor miles down the highway. Shelter, however dilapidated, was paramount. Now marooned in this dim sepulchral hallway, her travel-worn valise a silent witness at her feet, regret began its insidious bloom. One last futile attempt with the card, a sigh escaping her lips, and she turned back towards the lobby. It lay cavernous and deserted, save for the solitary figure behind the reception desk, a young man, Silas, whose nocturnal pallor was deepened by the bruised smudges beneath his eyes. His smile, when he offered it, stretched a fraction too wide, unsettlingly bright in the gloom. "A problem," Alara began, her voice raspy, approaching the counter. "The key card for 314, it refuses to cooperate." Silas's brittle smile flickered, vanishing for a heartbeat. His fingers danced across a keyboard, brow furrowed in concentration. "Apologies, madam, but my system shows no occupancy for room 314. Confusion fogged Alara's tired mind. "That's impossible. I checked in barely an hour ago. You processed it yourself. Gave me this key." He shook his head, a slow, deliberate motion. "Regrettably, madam, that cannot be accurate. I've been stationed here throughout the night. No check-ins have occurred." An icy tendril traced its way down her spine. She scrabbled in her handbag, retrieving the thin paper sleeve housing the offending card. "See?" she insisted, pushing it across the worn laminate. "Room 314, your handwriting." Silas scrutinized the sleeve, the crease between his brows deepening. "Madam, this script is unfamiliar. Furthermore," he held up the plastic rectangle, "this style of keycard hasn't been in circulation here for years." Indeed, held aloft, it looked archaic, thicker and less glossy than the sleek devices she'd glimpsed earlier near his terminal. Her thoughts spun, a dizzying vortex. "I don't grasp this. I was just there, my belongings." "Perhaps we should investigate," he offered, his tone shifting to one of practiced, placating calm. Alara trailed him back towards the elevator, then down the hushed third-floor corridor, a miasma of unease thickening with every step. At room 314, Silas inserted a master key. The lock yielded with an oily thunk. Alara pushed past him, bracing for the sight of her valise on the neatly turned-down bed, her coat slung over the back of the chair. Instead, emptiness. The room was pristine, immaculate, bearing no trace of recent habitation. "This can't be," she whispered, the sound fragile in the sterile air. Her voice trembled. "My luggage was here. I unpacked toiletries. I showered." Silas observed her, his expression a careful blend of professional concern and nascent suspicion. "Madam, are you quite well? Is it possible you've mistaken the hotel?" A vehement shake of her head. "No, I haven't mistaken anything. I know I checked in here. I spoke with you." Yet, even as the words tumbled out, corrosive doubt seeped in. His face remained a blank mask, devoid of any flicker of recognition, any echo of their prior exchange. Could she have conjured it all? "Allow me to suggest you sit for a moment," Silas proposed gently. "Shall I contact someone for you?" She collapsed onto the edge of the bed, the unfamiliar springs groaning beneath her slight weight. Her mind felt like shattered glass. "No, thank you. Just a moment to think." He nodded, a model of solicitousness, and withdrew, closing the door softly behind him, leaving her entombed in the room that wasn't hers, yet should have been. Alara struggled to reconstruct the sequence, the weary drive, the flickering sign, the check-in, this very room. She could vividly recall unpacking a few items, the brief solace of the shower's spray, sinking onto this bed for what was meant to be a fleeting rest. And then, oblivion. A blank space where memory should reside. Had sleep claimed her so deeply? Had she sleepwalked? But that failed to account for the vanished luggage, the clerk's utter denial, the hotel's apparent amnesia regarding her existence. Her mobile phone, retrieved from her pocket, offered only a mocking, lifeless screen. Dead, naturally. With hands that shook perceptibly, she slid open the drawer of the bedside table, searching for the standard hotel compendium. What lay inside instead was a small, unassuming notebook, its cover plain. Intrigued, she lifted it. The pages within were brittle, filled with cramped, handwritten script. The ink faded to a watery brown against the yellowed paper. In the room's weak light, she strained to decipher the words. Day 47. Another guest gone missing overnight. The third this month. No one else seems to register it, or perhaps they do, silenced by fear. How much longer can I endure this post? But the thought of leaving, what might follow? A glacial coldness seeped into Alara's veins. She flipped forward, each entry a darker descent into paranoia and dread. Tales of patrons checking in but never departing, room designations shifting like phantoms in the night, staff members dissolving into thin air. The final visible entry clawed at her attention. If you are reading this document, you are imperiled. Depart immediately. Trust no one. They will prevent your escape if they suspect you understand. She slammed the notebook shut, her heart hammering against her ribs like a trapped bird. A hoax? Some elaborate, cruel prank targeting weary travelers? Yet the tremor in her hands, the icy knot tightening in her stomach, screamed otherwise. This felt terrifyingly authentic. Escape now. Alara crept towards the door, pressing her ear against the cool wood. Silence reigned in the corridor beyond. Slowly, agonizingly, she turned the handle, easing the door open a crack, empty. She slipped out, her bare feet padding noiselessly across the threadbare carpet. Her shoes? Their location was a mystery she had no intention of solving now. As she ghosted towards the stairwell, a door clicked open further down the hall, behind her. She froze, every muscle taut, resisting the urge to look back. "May I assist you, madam?" Silas's voice, but altered, stripped of its earlier solicitousness. now imbued with a chilling flatness, a hard metallic edge. She ran. Plunging into the stairwell, she took the steps in frantic bounds, 2, 3 at a time. Footfalls echoed behind her, unnaturally swift, inhumanly light. She burst into the lobby, breath tearing at her lungs. It felt wrong. The furniture seemed subtly older, the wallpaper more faded, actively peeling in places, and it was utterly deserted. No late arrivals, no lingering staff, only Alara and the relentless drumming of those pursuing steps growing terrifyingly close. The main entrance beckoned. She lunged for the heavy glass door, fingers closing around the handle, yanking with desperate strength. It held fast. "No, please, no," she whimpered, pulling again, rattling it uselessly. It was as if the door had become one with its frame, sealed shut. Spinning around, frantically seeking another egress, she stopped dead. Silas stood blocking her path. But it wasn't the young man from the desk. His skin possessed a sickly, grayish pallor, sagging loosely over sharp cheekbones. His eyes were sunken pits, devoid of light or life. When his lips peeled back in a grotesque semblance of a smile, his teeth showed long, yellowed, and unnervingly pointed. "Leaving so precipitously?" he inquired, his voice a dry, rasping whisper that scraped against her nerves. "But your stay has only just commenced." Alara recoiled, her back hitting the unyielding door. What do you want?" He tilted his head, regarding her with those vacant, dead eyes. "Want? My dear Alara, we desire nothing from you. We merely desire you to remain indefinitely." As he spoke, other figures began to coalesce from the lobby's deepest shadows. Spectral staff, hollow-eyed guests, all sharing that same deathly gray complexion, those same lifeless stares. They advanced upon her, a slow, inexorable tide of decay. Alara screamed then, a raw sound torn from her throat, pounding futilely on the sealed door behind her. "Help! Is anyone there? Help me!" But the lobby absorbed the sound, offering only silence in return. She was utterly alone, trapped within a hotel that flickered at the edges of reality, surrounded by entities that wore human shapes like ill-fitting costumes. Silas reached for her, his chillingly cold fingers brushing against the bare skin of her arm. She flinched violently away, squeezing her eyes shut, bracing for an impact, an end. And then she awoke. Alara bolted upright in bed, sucking in air in ragged gasps. She was in her bed, the familiar contours of her own apartment surrounding her. Morning sunlight slanted through the blinds, painting stripes across the floor. The comforting, mundane symphony of city traffic drifted in from outside. It had all been a dream, a nightmare of suffocating intensity and detail, but unreal nonetheless. A shaky laugh escaped her lips as she raked a hand through sweat-dampened hair. Of course, hotels that devoured guests, undead concierges, preposterous. Yet, as she rose, preparing to face the day, a lingering disquiet clung to her like a shroud. The dream's vividness remained unnervingly sharp, its textures and terrors imprinted on her mind. It wasn't until she reached for her clothes that she saw it. There, incongruously placed on her bedside table, sat a small, faded notebook. The blood in her veins turned to ice water. With trembling hands, she picked it up, its brittle cover strangely familiar beneath her fingertips. She opened it to the first page, the faded ink swimming before her eyes. Day 1. I have finally broken free, yet I suspect this freedom is illusory. They will locate me in time. They invariably do. If you are reading this, exercise caution. Do not check in, for once they possess you, release is never granted. The notebook slipped from her grasp, thudding softly onto the carpet. Her mind reeled, refusing to accept the implication. Impossible. It couldn't be real. But as her gaze swept across the familiar space of her bedroom, she began to register the subtle inconsistencies. The precise pattern of the wallpaper seemed somehow altered from her memory. The familiar cityscape framed by her window felt subtly skewed, the angles just slightly wrong. And there, lying innocuously on her dresser, catching the morning light, was a plastic key card. Embossed upon it were the numerals 314. She sank slowly to the floor, the horrifying reality crashing down upon her like a physical blow. She hadn't escaped. There had been no nightmare, no awakening. The hotel had merely shifted its form, weaving a comforting illusion around her, a deceptive sanctuary. But the truth was now starkly, terrifyingly clear. She was still a guest, checked in, and likely to remain so forever. The city bled out behind me, its Friday night pulse fading as I pushed the car towards the skeletal embrace of Denver's outskirts. Exhaustion was a physical weight, settling deep in my bones, my apartment a distant haven. The freeway, usually a vein throbbing with traffic, lay strangely vacant, the asphalt whispering under my tires in the profound hush of midnight. Darkness wasn't just the absence of light. It was a presence, thick and tangible, pressing against the windows. Gas station signs blinked like tired eyes, casting skeletal shadows that writhed and stretched across the empty lanes. 12:15 a.m. glowed green on the dash. The urban clamor had dissolved into the lonely bark of a far-off dog, the dry rustle of unseen leaves. Weekend thoughts, camaraderie, blessed oblivion flickered, fragile moths against the encroaching weariness that threatened to seal my eyelids. Highway 70 unfurled, a ribbon of obsidian slicing through the nocturnal void. My headlamps carved a fleeting tunnel of light, swallowing empty tarmac and the occasional phantom rush of another vehicle, gone too fast to register. The world outside was a monochrome etching, stark trees clawing at the sky, desolate plains, the relentless geometry of the road. Perhaps 15 miles dissolved behind me when a silhouette materialized at the road's edge. A stranded motorist? My initial thought, quickly followed by a prickle of apprehension. The figure wore a coat that looked ancient, defeated by time and weather, and clutched something dull. A flashlight, maybe. I eased off the accelerator, my pulse quickening its rhythm. Alone, out here at this hour, it sang an off-key song. The car sighed onto the shoulder, engine murmuring. Blackness pooled behind me, punctured only by my own lights and the remote pinpricks of distant lamps. Window down, cool air rushed in. Need a lift? My voice sounded thin in the quiet. A pause, then the figure pivoted, moving towards me with an unnerving lack of urgency, a steady, unhurried gait. Their face remained mostly obscured by shadow, yet something in their posture felt dissonant. Closer now, I saw the slight tremor in their hands, the way their eyes darted, scanning the darkness. Yes, a ride would be helpful. The voice emerged, low and scraped raw, carrying an inflection I couldn't quite pin. Slavic, perhaps, or something further east. A beat of hesitation, the lateness, the isolation. But the thought of continuing alone felt suddenly less appealing. All right, get in. The click of the door unlocking echoed. They slipped into the back seat swiftly, a silent presence settling behind me. Gear engaged, wheels biting gravel, we merged back onto the highway. A glance in the rearview mirror, eyes fixed forward, staring through the windshield, through me, into the unending night. Silence stretched taut between us, broken only by the engine's drone and the intermittent crunch of the tires over unseen imperfections in the road. Tentative conversational openings. Headed far? Which way you coming from? Met brief, murmured responses or simple nods. The quiet deepened, becoming heavier. After 10 minutes suspended in this vacuum, I tried again. So where are you trying to get to? Finally, a near whisper. Home. Made a wrong turn somewhere. A nod from me, feigning understanding. Lost souls weren't uncommon. Where'd you turn off from? A vague gesture towards the left, into impenetrable darkness. Came from Ash Lane, not sure where to go now. Ash Lane. My phone's map placed that miles back, near the derelict Vance Mill. There's a service station up ahead, maybe 5 miles. We can stop if you need directions. Another nod, but the tension in their posture didn't ease. The miles crawled. The road seemed to narrow, the darkness outside congealing, becoming somehow more solid. 20 minutes bled away. Then something flickered in the rearview mirror. A shape, darker than the night, pacing the car just beyond the passenger side. My head snapped around nothing. Empty lane. Heart stuttered. Another glance back at the mirror, still empty. Imagination, I told myself. Fatigue playing tricks. Beside me, the passenger remained utterly still, gaze locked ahead. Focus, Silas, focus on the road. But the sensation lingered, a persistent, invisible scrutiny. A curve loomed, headlights slicing impotently at the dark. Rounding it, the skeletal frame of a farmhouse emerged from the gloom, perched precariously by the roadside. Boarded windows stared like blind eyes. The porch sagged, defeated. A shiver traced its way down my spine. That's the old Vance place, I offered, aiming for casual. Empty for decades. The passenger nodded, breaking their silence. Feels haunted out here. A nervous chuckle escaped me. Yeah, it has that reputation. We passed the derelict house, but the air in the car felt suddenly colder, charged. The feeling of being watched intensified. My knuckles whitened on the wheel. Another glance at the passenger, still staring, impassive. Abruptly, the car jolted violently, hitting a deep pothole. The engine sputtered, coughed a complaint. I cursed, pulling onto the shoulder again, killing the engine. Hang on, let me see. The passenger didn't move, just watched as I climbed out. Flashlight beam cutting the dark, I peered under the hood. Nothing obviously amiss, just road grime, the usual mechanics. Looks okay, I called back, sliding into the driver's seat. Just a bad bump. The engine turned over smoothly, purring back to life. A deep breath. Calmed down. Okay, let's get going. Station isn't far now. We drove on. The trees seemed to lean closer, their branches like grasping fingers. The headlamps felt weaker, barely penetrating the oppressive black. My gaze kept flicking to the passenger, whose silent, unwavering presence grew more unnerving with each passing mile. Another 10 minutes and then salvation, the weak, flickering glow of the service station sign ahead. Relief washed through me, potent and sudden. There it is, we'll stop. I guided the car into the brightly lit, yet deserted lot, cutting the engine. Right, we're here. Need gas, snacks, anything? The passenger nodded, hand moving towards a pocket. Thank you. I unlocked the doors. Before they could move, a bizarrely strong gust of wind whipped through the lot, rattling the sign, plunging the temperature. I shivered involuntarily. You all right? I asked. They nodded, though their hands trembled visibly now. Yes, just cold. I headed to the pump, the familiar clicks and hums, a small anchor to normalcy. Filling the tank, my eyes kept straying to the car, to the still figure inside, staring straight ahead. This was wrong. A deep unease coiled in my gut. Fueling done, I returned, forcing the feeling down. The passenger hadn't moved. Okay, ready to roll. Key in the ignition. As we pulled away from the island of light, back towards the highway's maw, I glanced over one last time. They were looking out the side window now, gaze fixed on something beyond my sight in the darkness. The knot in my stomach tightened. Everything okay back there? They turned to face me, and I saw their eyes properly for the first time, pale, unnervingly hollow, like empty sockets reflecting the dim dash lights. I believe, they said, voice soft as dust. You should continue alone. Confusion prickled. What? But you need to get home. A slow shake of the head, their expression remote, detached. No. You need to leave. Now. Before the words fully registered, a high-pitched screech ripped through the air from the direction of the station. I whipped my head around. The station's lights flickered violently, dimmed, then sputtered out, plunging the lot back into near darkness. The wind howled, the only sound in the suddenly profound silence. What the hell is going on? Panic flared hot and sharp. The passenger offered no answer. Instead, their form began to shimmer, losing substance, edges blurring like watercolor in rain. They grew translucent. My eyes widened, disbelief warring with terror. Wait, what? I reached out, a reflexive, useless gesture. My hand passed straight through the space they had occupied mere seconds before. No, don't! Their image dissolved completely, leaving only the empty back seat and the lingering chill. I sat frozen, heart hammering against my ribs, the echo of the screech fading, hallucinating, stress, fatigue. Get a grip, Silas. Just tired, I muttered, the words sounding hollow. Need to get home. Engine on, I eased the car away from the darkened station, its dead lights receding in the mirror. The road felt altered, the atmosphere heavier, colder. Silence pressed in, absolute and suffocating. 5 miles further down the relentless highway, another figure stood by the roadside. Heart leaped, a cold dread washing over me. Not again. I slowed instinctively, gripping the wheel. Part of me expected them to approach, but they remained perfectly still, a static silhouette against the night. I pulled over again, engine idling, a low thrum against the silence. Window down, cautiously. Hey, you need another ride? Nothing. The figure didn't stir, didn't react. Hello? My voice trembled. Then it began to move. Slowly, deliberately, walking towards the car. The face remained shadowed, indistinct. Pure animal panic surged. Nope, gotta go, I stammered, slamming the gear shift, flooring the accelerator. The car leaped forward. A frantic glance in the rearview mirror. The figure stood motionless by the road, watching me flee into the darkness. My mind spun, grasping for explanations. Elaborate prank, a waking nightmare, or something else. The accelerator stayed pinned. The car's interior felt icy, my breath pluming in the dim light. The highway stretched on, an endless black conveyor belt into nothingness. Miles later, flashing blue and red lights bloomed ahead. A patrol car parked on the shoulder. Relief warred with a new anxiety. Maybe they know something. I pulled over. An officer, Officer Keene, according to his tag, approached, flashlight beam sweeping over me. Everything all right, sir? I nodded, forcing steadiness into my voice. Yeah, officer, just taking a moment. His gaze flicked past me towards the empty passenger seat. Got company tonight? Yeah. Picked up a hitchhiker back there, I said, gesturing vaguely towards the back. Keene's expression shifted, a flicker of something knowing, weary. You mean someone who just wasn't there anymore? A cold fist clenched around my heart. What do you mean? He sighed, rubbing his forehead. Been getting calls about a phantom on this stretch of 70 for years. People pick someone up, quiet type usually, then poof, gone. Sometimes they see him again further down. Realization crashed over me. So that was... He nodded gravely. Seems like it. Story goes way back. Best advice? Stay calm, keep driving. I'll let you get on your way. He gave a short nod, turned, and walked back to his cruiser, leaving me bathed in the pulsing silence of the highway. I sat there, the officer's words echoing, confirming the impossible. Hands shaking, heart pounding a frantic rhythm. Engine back on, fear mingled with a strange, perverse relief. I wasn't crazy. As I drove away, the image of the fading passenger, the officer's grim confirmation, replayed relentlessly. The road felt infinitely longer now, each mile marker a small victory against the oppressive dark. The rear-view mirror became an object of dread, checked compulsively, expecting, fearing to see that pale face materialize again. The final stretch blurred. Then, finally, the distant glow of Denver resolving into familiar city lights, a sanctuary, merging onto populated streets felt like surfacing from deep water. The tension began to ebb as Highway 70 receded behind me. My apartment complex emerged, its mundane lights a beacon. Outside the car, the cool night air felt normal again, filled with the low thrum of the city. Inside, door locked, I leaned against it, breath catching in my throat. The hitchhiker, the vanishing, the legend. Surreal, yet the fear had been utterly real. Phone check, distractions needed, a few texts, one from Marco about the weekend trip. Yes, still on, I typed back quickly. Couch claimed I courted sleep, but it remained elusive. The phantom's hollow eyes stared back from the darkness behind my eyelids. Haunted highways, no longer just stories. Morning light didn't entirely dispel the unease. A strange compulsion grew. Drive Highway 70 again, in daylight. See it stripped of its nocturnal menace. Maybe it would make sense. The highway hummed with daytime traffic, sun glinting off chrome. No lone figures, no spectral silhouettes. Foolish, perhaps, to half believe, yet the chill lingered. Halfway along the familiar stretch, a car was pulled over. A man stood beside it, thumb out. He looked familiar, a jolt like static electricity. The hitchhiker from last night? Heart skipped. Against all reason, eyes slowed. "Hey, need a ride?" I called out, the words echoing last night's encounter. He turned, smiled, a thin, unsettling curve of the lips. "Yeah, thanks," headed towards Denver. "Same way," I replied, popping the passenger door lock. He slid in, settling without a word. Deja vu washed over me, thick and cloying. We drove. I watched him in the mirror, staring straight ahead, just like before. Miles ticked by. "Where you coming from?" I ventured. A brief glance my way, then back to the road. "Just passing through." His hands rested on his lap, unnaturally still. "Need anything? Water?" A slight shake of the head. "No, thank you. Just need to get home." That phrase again. A shiver traced its cold path down my spine. "Okay, let me know." Silence descended again, heavy with unspoken questions and remembered fear. My focus splintered between the road and the unnerving presence beside me. Suddenly, my phone chirped, startling me. Marco. "Hey, still coming this weekend?" Yeah, on my way now," I managed, trying to sound normal. Hanging up, I glanced sideways. His eyes met mine for a fraction of a second. Recognition, or something colder? My pulse hammered. "You okay?" I asked, forcing casualness. He nodded, face blank. "Fine." Deep breath. "Drop it, Silas." "Right, on we go." We drove on, the miles passing uneventfully, yet thick with tension. The exit for Marco's turnoff appeared. "This is me," I said, turning to him. "Need anything before I head off?" He gave a small, almost imperceptible nod, unbuckling his belt. "Thanks for the lift." He stepped out, turned, and simply walked away down the exit ramp, melting into the other travelers. No vanishing act, no chilling pronouncements, just gone. Relief warred with a persistent, nagging fear. "Okay then," I muttered, pulling away. The rest of the trip was blessedly normal, the tension slowly draining away, but the encounters resonated, blurring the lines. Back home, the need to understand became overwhelming. Online searches, Highway 70, Phantom Hitchhiker, local legends. Articles surfaced. A name, Alara Vance, a story decades old. Young woman, car trouble near the old Vance Mill late one night. Flagged down a ride. Car found abandoned days later. Alara vanished without a trace. Since then, the sightings. The quiet passenger. The sudden disappearances. The pieces clicked into place. Alara's spirit trapped in a loop, reliving her final fearful journey. My encounters weren't random, they were echoes of her tragedy. The silent presence, the fading form, the chilling cold. A purpose began to form amidst the fear. Maybe I could help. I found contact information for Dr. Eris Thorne, a local historian specializing in folklore and haunted places. He listened intently to my story over coffee, his eyes bright with academic curiosity. If Alara's presence is tied to unresolved trauma, Thorne mused, steepling his fingers, acknowledging her, perhaps addressing what keeps her tethered, might offer release. Armed with Thorne's advice and a fragile sense of resolve, I drove towards the old Vance Mill as dusk deepened into night. The area was now a neglected patch of parkland, swallowed by weeds, shadowed by tall sentinel trees. The air hung still, pregnant with silence, broken only by the chirr of crickets. Parking the car, I walked towards the looming skeletal structure of the mill, flashlight beam cutting a nervous path. The air grew noticeably colder, my breath misting. A weight settled on my shoulders, unseen but palpable. The mill creaked, a lonely sound in the vast quiet. "Ilara," I called out, my voice absorbed by the darkness. "My name is Silas. I want to help." Silence answered. I circled the decaying structure, flashlight probing the shadows. Then a sound, faint, ethereal, carried on a sudden breeze. A whisper. "Help me." I froze. The voice. The same low, raspy tone from the car. "Ilara, are you here?" The whisper strengthened, gaining urgency. "Need to go home." Determination surged through me, pushing back the fear. "I understand. I'm here. Tell me how I can help you move on." The air shimmered almost imperceptibly. A cold draft spiraled around me. My flashlight flickered. "Tell me what you need," I repeated, voice steadier than I felt. A moment of charged silence, then the whisper returned, clearer now. "Find the letter. Holds the truth." Where is it?" "Under the old oak." The voice faded, but the direction was clear. I turned towards the massive, ancient oak nearby, its gnarled branches stark against the night sky. Leaves rustled underfoot. Kneeling at its base, I swept the light across the tangled roots and debris. There, half buried, was the corner of an envelope. Heart pounding, I carefully unearthed it. Old paper, yellowed, brittle with age. Inside, a folded letter. The ink was faded, spidery script barely legible. "To whoever finds this, my name is Ilara Vance. That night, I was desperate, afraid. I trusted the driver who stopped. It was a mistake. Please, know I meant no harm to anyone on this road. I only wanted help. Help me find peace. Let me rest. Thank you." Tears blurred my vision. Her fear, her final plea, resonated across the decades. "I'll help you, Ilara," I whispered, clutching the fragile paper. "I understand." I carefully placed the letter back in its envelope. Standing, I felt a subtle shift in the atmosphere. A gentle breeze, impossibly soft, brushed past my cheek, carrying not cold, but a sense of release, of gratitude. The oppressive weight lifted. The silence felt different now, peaceful, empty. I knew she was gone. Back in the car, the first tentative streaks of dawn painted the eastern horizon. The highway stretched before me, quiet, waiting for the day. Driving away from the old Vance mill, a profound sense of closure settled over me. Ilara's restless journey was over. The phantom of Highway 70 could finally rest. The following night, I drove that stretch again. A test. The road was just a road. Dark, yes, but empty of spectral passengers. The rearview mirror reflected only empty highway. A small smile touched my lips. The weight was gone, replaced by the quiet satisfaction of having listened, of having helped. The highway held no more ghosts for me. Pulling into my complex, I cast one last look back at the dark ribbon of road. Now just asphalt and distance, finally free. The memory would remain, a strange and chilling chapter, but peace had settled, not just for Ilara, but for me too. My fountain pen, a sleek obsidian shard, hesitated above the virgin page, the silence thick with the weight of untold stories. Journalism had been my calling, a relentless pursuit of elusive truths. Yet this particular thread felt different, woven from shadows and whispers. The disappearances plaguing this forgotten Appalachian hollow had snagged my curiosity, pulling me toward an abyss I couldn't yet fathom. I, Alara Vance, seasoned chronicler of scandals and catastrophes over 10 years, sensed a narrative here darker than any I'd chased before, one poised to swallow me whole. 6 souls had dissolved into the mountain air within a year, vanishing from Havenwood Gap, a town clinging precariously to the slopes, population barely scraping 3,000. The local constabulary floundered adrift in a sea of bewildered shrugs, while a contagion of fear tightened its grip on the townsfolk. It was the quintessential enigma, steeped in mystery, radiating urgency, promising revelation. When my editor nodded assent, I gathered my skepticism and my tape recorder, setting coordinates for the heart of the unease. Havenwood Gap greeted me not with Appalachian charm, but with a palpable hush. Main Street, typically an artery of rural life, lay strangely dormant. Faces behind dusty shop windows tracked my passage with undisguised suspicion. Conversations dwindled to murmurs as I breached the threshold of the Soul Diner. My first pilgrimage was to the sheriff's domain. Silas Croft, the man presiding over Havenwood Gap's meager law, was carved from granite and exhaustion, his eyes reservoirs of weariness. He parried my inquiries initially, a wall of official reticence, but the dam of his composure eroded under persistent questioning. "Listen," he rasped, his voice a low, gravelly thing, leaning across the scarred expanse of his desk. "These aren't normal vanishings. No trace, no struggle, not so much as a scuffed heel print in the mud, like the earth just opened wide and swallowed them." My pen scratched frantically across the notepad, synapses firing with grim hypotheses. "Any thread connecting them?" I probed. Sheriff Croft offered a slow, deliberate shake of his head. "None we can divine. Different walks of life, different ages. Only commonality. They all went missing near Whisperwind Woods." Whisperwind Woods. The name itself seemed to exhale a chill, prickling my skin for reasons logic couldn't grasp. Offering Croft my thanks, I departed, the forest now looming large in my itinerary. It stood like a primordial bastion at the town's edge, an impenetrable wall of ancient sentinel trees. Standing there, at the cusp of its domain, an unnerving certainty settled upon me. I was being observed. Shadows writhed at the periphery of vision, and the sighing wind carried fragmented utterances just beyond comprehension. Days bled into one another as I navigated the tight-lipped community, attempting to assemble fragments of the truth. Fear was a currency here, freely exchanged in hushed tones. Hesitation reigned, yet fragments emerged, accounts of spectral lights dancing deep within the woods, disembodied chanting borne on nocturnal breezes, cautionary tales of those who entered the forest's embrace and were never seen again. One evening, immersed in my notes within the sterile confines of my motel room, a sharp rap echoed on the door. An elderly woman stood there, eyes wide, radiating an almost feral terror. "You have to leave," she hissed, her voice brittle as dead leaves. "You're digging. It'll draw them down on us all." Before bewilderment could form into a question, she thrust a crumpled parchment into my hand and scuttled away into the gloom. With unsteady fingers, I smoothed the paper. A crudely rendered map of Whisperwind Woods lay revealed, a single point marked starkly in crimson ink. Prudence screamed for the authorities for handing over this ominous guide and retreating to safer ground. But the core of me, the relentless seeker that defined Alara Vance, refused to yield. The truth beckoned from the map's red X. I had to witness it myself. Come twilight the following day, I stood again at the forest's threshold. Flashlight clutched tight, my pulse a frantic drum against my ribs. The marked location lay deep within, a trek of hours through deepening gloom. As I crossed the boundary, the canopy seemed to knit itself together overhead, swallowing the last vestiges of moonlight. Time warped as I pushed onward, the oppressive darkness birthing phantoms in my peripheral vision. More than once, fleeting shapes seemed to dart between trees, and whispers coiled around me, sourceless yet intimate. Finally, the coordinates aligned. At first glance, nothing distinguished this patch of wilderness, merely more tangled undergrowth and towering trees. But then, sweeping the flashlight's beam low, a metallic glint snagged my eye. Concealed behind a dense thicket of rhododendron lay a heavy wooden door, set horizontally into the earth like the entrance to some forgotten root cellar. My heart hammered against my ribs. This was it. The Nexus. Every nerve shrieked retreat, a primal urge to flee the suffocating presence of the place. Yet, having journeyed this far, surrender was unthinkable. Drawing a ragged breath, I seized the cold iron handle and heaved. The door protested with a low groan, swinging inward to reveal stone steps plunging into absolute blackness. An exhalation of air rose to meet me, damp, stagnant, carrying an unnerving undertone I couldn't initially place. Something cloyingly metallic and faintly sweet, like decay mixed with cheap perfume. I began the descent, my light carving a fragile tunnel through the oppressive dark. With each step downward, that peculiar, sickening aroma intensified, becoming almost suffocating. At the base of the stairs, another door barred the way. Faint light bled from beneath it. Muffled, rhythmic chanting pulsed from the other side. My hand trembled as it closed around the handle. The scene that unfolded as I pushed the door open is seared into my memory, a tableau of pure nightmare. A vast natural cavern spread before me, illuminated by the erratic dance of torchlight. At its heart stood a massive stone altar, its surface darkly stained, slick with something dreadful. Around it, figures clad in heavy robes stood chanting, their faces obscured by deep hoods. The language was guttural, alien, rising and falling in hypnotic waves. But it was the offering upon the altar that froze the marrow in my bones. A human form, impossible to discern gender, bound and feebly thrashing. As I stood paralyzed, transfixed by the horror, one robed figure lifted high a wickedly curved knife, its blade catching the torchlight with hungry menace. A gasp must have escaped my lips, a tiny sound amplified in the charged silence, because in perfect unison, every hooded head swiveled towards me. Time fractured, then the tableau shattered into pandemonium. The chanters surged forward, their ritualistic intonations twisting into guttural cries of fury. I spun and fled, legs churning, scrambling back up the cold stone steps. Their pursuit echoed behind me, a terrifying resonance in the confined space. Bursting from the cellar door, I plunged back into the disorienting blackness of Whisperwind Woods, refusing to look back. Branches clawed at my face, my lungs burned, each gasp searing, direction dissolved. Instinct alone propelled me forward, fueled by raw terror. How long I ran remains a blur, an eternity compressed into frantic minutes. Eventually, blessedly, I stumbled through the tree line, collapsing onto the dew-soaked grass at the edge of Havenwood Gap. I didn't cease my flight until I fell through the sheriff's office door, a ragged, sobbing heap on the worn linoleum. The aftermath was a maelstrom. I choked out my horrific account to a visibly stunned Sheriff Croft, who immediately radioed for state and federal assistance. Within hours, Havenwood Gap swarmed with agents, and a tactical team prepared a full-scale assault on the forest location. They found the subterranean chamber just as I described, but it stood utterly empty. The cultists had evaporated, taking their victim and scrubbing away all but the most indelible proof. The ominous deep stains soaking the stone altar, silent testimony to unspeakable acts. In the ensuing days, reciting my testimony repeatedly to grim-faced officials, the true enormity of my discovery began to crystallize. The disappearances, the eerie forest phenomena, all threads leading back to this hidden sect. Their tenure, the scope of their atrocities. Questions destined, perhaps, to remain unanswered. My story ignited a media firestorm. Headlines screamed, "Reporter unearths ritualistic cult in remote town." Validation should have warmed me. Pride should have swelled. Instead, a cold, persistent dread took root deep within my soul, because I harbored a secret, a chilling certainty I hadn't dared voice to the authorities, scarcely admitted even to myself. In that heart-stopping instant within the cavern, as the hooded figures turned as one, I had seen a face, a fleeting glimpse beneath a falling hood, yet unmistakable, the weathered, weary features of Sheriff Silas Croft. I fled Havenwood Gap at the first opportunity, but the place clings to me like grave dirt. Sometimes in the dead hours of the night, I fancy I hear faint chanting carried on the wind, perceive robed silhouettes flickering at the edge of sight. Trauma, I tell myself, residual phantoms born of terror. Yet a deeper instinct whispers a more terrifying truth. They are still out there, watching, waiting, and one day, inevitably, they may seek retribution, for I have gazed upon their hidden rites, breached their sanctum, and in exposing their darkness, I may have irrevocably marked myself for its return. So I write, I investigate. The pursuit of truth is the only shield I possess. Perhaps, just perhaps, by dragging secrets relentlessly into the light, I can keep myself one step ahead of the encroaching shadows that forever nip at my heels.